If you invested $10,000 in Apple stock 10 years ago, you will have more than $100,000 today. You will have made more than $100,000 in 10 years by investing $10,000 in Apple stock. Those are some incredible returns. So, how did Apple get there? I'm going to answer that question in this video, as well as offer a bonus at the end of the video. What if investors wanted to buy Amazon stock today? Can they expect similar returns over the next decade? So I'll answer that question as well at the end of this video. So let's start with how Apple got here, right? How did it earn 1000% return in the last decade? And I think one way we can identify those returns is to look at Apple's revenue in the trailing 12 months and look at this over the last decade. And what we see here is an incredible rise in Apple's revenue, going from a little over $160 billion in 2014, rising all the way to 387.5 billion in the most recent trailing 12 months. Now, those are some incredible increases. Now, many companies have let's say doubled their revenue like Apple did in the last decade. But it's different to double your revenue from 5 billion to 10 billion than to double your revenue from 160 billion to 387 billion. Doubling at this scale is much, much harder, and Apple was able to do that. And that's why investors have rewarded Apple with an increase in the share price. Now, one other thing that can explain Apple's increase in share price, if we look at Apple's earnings per share over the trailing 12 months and looking at this figure for the last decade, you can see Apple's earnings per share from less than $2 has nearly tripled to $5.89 for the trailing 12 months. So Apple has tripled its earnings per share, right? So increasing profitability while it's also increasing revenue. Now, part of the way they've been able to increase profitability over the last decade has been really promoting their services business. Their services businesses have grown very nicely in this last decade. You think about Apple Music, Apple News, the Apple Cloud, the Apple Care, all of the services, the sales from the App Store, all of that has grown for Apple. And here's an interesting stat that you might not be aware of. Apple's services gross profit margin is over 70%. Compare that to Apple's gross profit margin on sales of its hardware of around, let's say, 35% on average over the last decade. So every dollar of services revenue is twice as profitable as a dollar in sales of hardware products like AirPods or the Apple Watch. That's incredible. And as that side of the business has increased to take a larger share of Apple's overall revenue, its profitability has expanded as well. So that's been the underlying story behind Apple's phenomenal growth over the last decade, and and continuous growth for that matter. This tailwind is likely to persist. I'm talking about the tailwind of services growing to take a larger share of Apple's overall revenue. That tailwind is likely to persist for several years more. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. So, can Apple investors of today expect similar returns for the next decade? In other words, if you're asking the question, is it too late to invest in Apple stock? Did I miss the boat? Should I look elsewhere? And the answer is no, it's not too late to invest in Apple stock today. What I have here is the Apple's forward price to earnings ratio. It's trading at a forward PE of 22.49, so the stock is not inherently expensive. So you can buy Apple stock today, hold it for the next decade, and you're probably going to have more money than you started with today. Now, I can't tell you exactly how much more money you're going to have. Are you going to get 10 times your money like you did in the previous decade? I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot less likely. It's a lot less likely that you're going to 10x your money in Apple over the next decade. But I can say with relative confidence that if you invest in Apple stock today, hold these shares for the next decade, you're probably going to have more money than you started with. You're probably going to have more money. And that's the goal with investing, right? To invest in stocks and in businesses and in products where you're going to increase your wealth, right? And if you are, choosing between investments, that's another story and that's another video. But if you're just thinking about investing in Apple stock today, if it'll be a good investment for the next decade, what I can tell you is you're probably going to have a higher amount of wealth than you started with if you invest in Apple stock for the next decade. All right, so that's all I've got for this video. I truly appreciate your viewership. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, I'm going to link to a couple of videos at the end of this one that I also think you will enjoy. So please click on one of those and I will see you over there.